warmer than we are here in Minnesota today, and happier than we are in Viking land as well. But I'm going to, Missy's just going to make a quick announcement about the website.
I just wanted to let everyone know that if you haven't already, you should have received an email about an hour ago that does have a link directly in there. So if you haven't already, reset your password by going to the members website. You can click that link and that'll take you directly to putting in your new password. It can actually be the same password you previously had, and that will update you and get you right into the new site. So I know as of this morning there was about 20 of you that had already done it, but we'd love to make sure that all the rest of you are able to access the new site. If you have any questions or problems, certainly feel free to email us or give us a call, and we'll definitely help you get that resolved. So again, just click the link in the email that you received this morning, and you should be off and running.
Super, thanks, Missy. And Missy put an awful lot of work into that, so thank her and Missy, her and Tricia, because they put a ton of work into that. And then if you find any glitches or little odds and ends that aren't working, please let us know, and please be patient as we fix those tiny little glitches. Also, if I've sent you an email with instructions with links to hit in order to get to different places on the website, obviously those are no longer working. So shoot me an email, and I'll do my best to get that new one out there with the new links, or you can just go directly to the website and go to those places as well. So first thing I want to do today is Marty is one of our members, and he has unbelievable experience, and he was sharing some things with me. So I thought we'd have a brief talk with him today. So Marty started in the business back in 1976, and in February 1980 he went and started recruiting banks in Arkansas, Missouri, Oklahoma to form a joint venture, and he expanded that into 25 states, and that venture was actually ended up being bought by U.S. Life in 1985. And then right after that, he started working with banks of all sizes, up to including 200-plus bank group owned by Jim Walton of Walmart. And this program was successful enough to have major insurance company hired Marty to help design a training course to teach agents exactly how to do that and to sell it to the banks. And then and actually, Marty's been in this business now, as of last March, 40 years. So I thought it'd be good to hear his take on 5Q and how we're different, how we're the same, what we bring to the table, what we maybe left on the table. So Marty, you were sharing some things with me, and I just appreciate how much experience, success you've already had in this industry, and I think your insights were interesting.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here, and hopefully we can share some information with some of these guys that would be beneficial to them. I know you and I talked about this, and I'm going to maybe go to this to start.
Yeah.
Early on in my career, in 1980 is when I was first exposed to working with banks, and I worked for a company who had went to work for them. They had spent thousands of dollars and man hours perfecting their process. And at that time, I really had never been exposed to a process. And we had to go through a 3-interview process and all that stuff. Excuse me. And then they gave us a manual which included all the scripts to use, much like what you're doing with your outfit. And the purpose of that was, unbeknownst to everybody at that time, was we found out that a process will ensure consistency with what you're doing. If you're just winging it and doing first one thing and then another, you never really know for sure did you cover all the key points, and it really affects your effectiveness. And so where I'm going with that is we found out early on that by having a process in place, which you do, it made it real easy for our management team to help coach the guys out in the field to increase their profitability, not only to themselves but to the company. And I have found out over the years that while it may seem real redundant, it can also really save your rear end too. I used to fly as a company pilot, and every airplane has a checklist. And if you get in that airplane and you don't go through that checklist, even though you might have just got out of it 10 minutes ago, you can be setting yourself up for a crash because you inadvertently left something out that you shouldn't have. And that's what I see happening in your process. If everybody just takes the time to do what they've been asked to do and not try to reinvent the wheel, the end result where it takes you is to a guaranteed result that can be improved over time if it's, if it needs to be. And I know you and I have talked about that, but that's the thing that I see. I've been involved with this. You can't hardly name an IMO that I haven't been involved with at some point in time. And when we were doing the bank program, we had a lot of IMOs wanting us to work with them to teach agents how to go recruit and sell in banks. And it was still is a very attractive thing to have happen. And what we learned, though, is that a lot of the IMOs have come out with what makes you think is a magic bullet or silver bullet with some kind of gimmick. But there's very seldom is there ever any process to get you to the end result. So a lot of guys will get involved with that. They'll do it for a period of time and then get disenchanted with it and go back to doing what they were doing. And that's what drew me actually to your program, is because I have two sons that have been bringing into the business that I want them to have a track to run on that is consistent. The consistency is what takes you to a higher level. And so my feedback to you is, and the guys that are perhaps new to this or even that have been experienced agents, I'll give you this example. It's easy to get apathetic for instance, about doing a 21-point checklist, particularly if you don't think people have any money. And I learned a real serious lesson with that years ago. I was going through that deal and thought I could pick and choose and figure out who had money and who didn't. And so was tempted to start making some shortcuts in how I made my approaches. And the very first person that I tried to do that on ended up, I went to this, well, actually, when he came to my meeting, he had his glasses taped together with adhesive tape. And I thought, oh, geez, what have I got here? But I ended up going to their house, just more or less just to patronize them. Turns out, before it was all said and done, over the next year and a half, they invested over $600,000. And so I learned then not to make assumptions, that what goes around comes around, and even though you may do the 21-point checklist and not draw any blood, you're still setting yourself up for success by getting better at what you're doing. And
can I jump in there about assumptions?
Yeah.
Because when you first, you've seen everything. You've seen everything under the sun. You've designed systems yourself. So when you came on, you were still a bit jaded, and you were like, yeah, Mike, sounds like you have a good thing, but I've heard this 100 times before. And so when you first came on, I was like, well, I'll give it a shot. But the more you looked into it, what did you find?
Well, the thing that I've been so impressed with is the consistency of what you're doing. You leave nothing to chance. And I've told you this before, but this is probably the first program that I've seen, and I've been watching this now since last August, that leaves nothing to chance. Okay, you're very detailed with what you do, and it's obviously from experience. And you're right. At first, I thought, well, okay, this is another one of those aha moments. And but as I've listened and and watched what happens, I've found out that that's not the case. And like you've said many times, is this the perfect thing? No, it's not. But is it a viable thing? Absolutely. And my experience has been, I've been around thousands of producers, and I can just tell you that when you've got a program that can propel you, to doing a minimum of $250,000 a year or more, then that's a better than average program, because most of them are not doing that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I appreciate that, Marty. And I think it's wonderful. I love to hear somebody that comes on who, first of all, has your kind of experience, your kind of success, and most importantly, your kind of skepticism and jaded eye, and saying, you know what, I've seen it all. This is just one more, shiny object, and sure, somebody's had success with it, but I'm going to get in here, and it's going to be the same old crap where I get in, sure, it has some good stuff, but it's just the same old that everybody else does, and I just love to hear when the light bulb kind of goes on, and you say, you know what, this is different. And so, I mean, how would you compare this to all the other things you've seen out there?
Well, the biggest thing that comes to mind is that you get the same answer twice. You don't get some BS answer because something didn't work. You always have the right answer. I know I've been involved with programs that just, sounded awesome when you started, and then as you got into it, then that's when all the I gotchas started. And you get all these surprises and all these excuses about why it don't work, or, well, here's what you need to try next. Well, your program's already addressed all that. And so it's as simple as following directions.
And I really appreciate that, Marty. I really appreciate that. And here's the guys that have success with 5Q and have over the last now almost 16 years, is instead of coming on and saying, you know what, this is not what I thought it was going to be, and they come on really excited, and the more they delve into it, the less meat that's actually on the bone. Instead, I love it, because when the successful guys that come on to 5Q, the more they get into it, they don't get less excited. They get more excited. They see, wow, this thing actually does work, and the more I delve into it, the more it works, and the more I get better at this, the more it works, and the easier. It's just a guy with your experience to give me that feedback. I really appreciate that, Marty. So thanks for sharing those thoughts today.
You're most welcome.
Thanks, Marty.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
And I agree with Brad says. I agree nothing is perfect, and Brad's going to be one of our biggest producers this year. I agree nothing is perfect, but I love how you keep improving the system. That's the thing about, I don't think anybody's ever called me or called Jeff and said, hey, this happened to me, and it didn't work. And for Jeff and me to shrug our shoulders and say, well, I don't know what to say. It worked for the other guy. I mean, we've always are able to pinpoint what went wrong, and if you know what, guys, let's have an answer to this. If you know what's wrong, what went wrong, what's the advantage of that? So let's see some answers. If we can almost pinpoint within a couple of minutes of what went wrong, that's right, Bert, you can fix it. And in fact, do we even require you to fix it? Those of you that have worked with Jeff or myself, do we even require you to fix it? What do? We give you the repair kit. We show you how to fix it. And that's the advantage of something that's worked for 16 years, is that we know the system backwards and forwards. We can find out if you're having a hiccup where that hiccup is. The system does work. Now, I would say, and Jeff, if you get on too, my opinion is, like, there is no perfect system out there. And I would say the biggest problem with our system is that it requires you to change your way of thinking and your way of communicating, and that's a difficult thing to do. That's what I would say. The only thing that prevents this from being the best system in the world is the fact that it's freaking hard. It's requiring you to change what you've been doing for years. And what would you say, Jeff, is the reason that biggest reason this system isn't perfect?
Yeah, well, I would say the same thing. Really, you always go back to the idea that it's born out of motivational interviewing and psychology, and so when somebody comes in and has a problem with drinking, let's say, we all know, if we asked everybody on the call, they would all get this right. Can the psychiatrist tell them, hey, drinking is a problem and it's going to screw up your marriage, it's going to screw up your job, it's going to screw up your life, and if you don't stop, you know, you're ruined. And really, I guess it could be as easy as that, but we all know that's not going to work. We all just have we have a saying in sales that says no one likes to be sold, but everyone likes to buy. And I think what we're really saying, the flip side of that and the way it is in psychology, is we all want to learn for ourselves. We want to discover for ourselves. We all feel comfortable if we come to the conclusion. And so I get people saying things like this, well, the system is so hard because I have to ask questions. The system is so hard because I have to learn scripts. Well, that's a tool for you guys to be able to let people come to the conclusions on their own. And it does. It takes a different mindset. Letting somebody else be the hero is just not how you're wired as salespeople. Letting them be the hero and discover for themselves, hey, this is the right thing for me. We just want to tell them, hey, this is the right thing for you. And I've got all these letters behind my name, so you should believe me. And I've got all these other clients who've done the same thing, so you should believe me. And that just doesn't work. It doesn't work in anything in life. And I don't know why we talk ourselves into thinking that it works in sales. But yeah, I'd say it's not as much about doing things as undoing them. And it's just hard. It's just a different way of thinking, and I think that's what makes it difficult for some people. The reality is some people are open. And like Mike said, some people, what I love is when somebody embraces that and they get excited about it. And other people are like, they look at it and they're like, it's going to be too much work.
Any skill in life, guys, playing the piano, basketball, any skill in life requires work. And I like what Kevin says. Tom Hopkins, Backrack, Zig Ziglar, sales training dies hard. Because what we're doing is the polar opposite of what they're doing. And I just finished a book talking about we're in the post-trust era, PTE, post-trust era, meaning that everybody is skeptical of everything. And they came to the same conclusion I've been preaching for 4 or 5 years now, which is the reason that's occurred is because of the Internet. Everybody can find all the information that lines up with their way of thinking anytime they want, 24/7, and oodles of it. So we live in the post-trust era, and their whole point, I was just reading the book saying, check, 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 check. I agreed with 90% of what, or in fact, they agreed with 90% of what we've been doing since 2000, and the book was just written 2 years ago. And so they're promoting all the stuff we've been doing since 2000 as the only way you're going to get people to trust you. But they admit that this is a different way of thinking for sales, a different way of presenting information, and it's slower, it's more plodding, it's non-intuitive to a salesperson, but it works. So Marty, thanks for sharing your experience, and Jeff, thanks for that. That's excellent. I couldn't have put it better myself. So we're going to have a little bit of fun right now. So Yahoo Finance did an article here a few weeks back, and they were talking about the Donald. And I thought this was hilarious what they showed here. So this is not a political statement one way or the other, but it's a look at how we can manipulate numbers, or sometimes when we don't look beneath the surface, we're not getting the true story. So they looked at Donald, and they said his net worth right now is, Forbes says it's $4.1 billion. Trump says it's $10 billion. So let's give the Donald the benefit and say that he's worth, it should have been $10 billion, did the wrong symbol there, $10 billion. So in 1982, Trump's worth was an estimated by Forbes at $200 million. Trump said $500 million. So again, we'll give Trump the benefit of the doubt and say it was worth $500 million. Okay? So now let's do the math. If Trump had sold his real estate holdings in 1982 and invested the $500 million in the S&P 500, so he was worth, according to him, $500 million. We're giving him the benefit of the doubt. If he'd sold all of his real estate and invested the $500 million in the S&P 500, guess where I'm going with this, guys? What are you guessing? This is how the Donald would look. Because if he'd invested in the S&P 500 and annualized return since from 1982 to 2014, the S&P 500 had an annualized return of 11.86%. That means every dollar invested in 1982 would be worth $40 by December 2014. That means 500 million times 40 is what? 20 billion. How much more is that than what he's worth today? Twice. So if he would have just taken that money and invested it in the S&P 500 for the last what? And done nothing, he wouldn't even have had to work. And would he have gotten bankrupt 5 times or 4 times like he has during that time period? So what's the lesson that we can glean from this? Well, first of all, it's tough to beat the index. Second of all, real estate and alternatives aren't all that. Third is crunch the numbers. So are these numbers a little bit surprising to you? Or do you think they'd be surprising to most people in the United States because they think he's a self-made billionaire? We'll get, it's kind of like the old joke. How do you make $1 million, guys? How do you make $1 million? How do you make $1 million? Yeah, you give $2 million to a broker. That's how you make $1 million. So I guess, how do you make $1 million with Donald Trump? Give him 2. Borrow. So crunch the numbers. And the only better investment than the index is one that doesn't lose money. But I thought, always crunch the numbers. Don't assume something's great because you're looking at the end numbers. You have to see what? Don't look at the end numbers. You have to see what? You have to see what? How they got there. I'll give you an example of that. One of the, we're talking about IMOs with Marty today. One of the IMOs out there is promoting his system and how great he was, and he brought in, I don't know how many tens of millions of dollars. And in the end, guess what we found out? So, let's see, I think they said he brought in $30 million over 2 years. $30 million over 2 years. Good or bad numbers, guys? Awesome numbers, right? And then what we find out is, guess what? His sister-in-law was the HR person for Verizon and basically sent all of the people retiring from Verizon to him. So really, guys, how about you guys? If your sister-in-law was sending you every single person that was retiring from Verizon, how many would you have written? So is that really that impressive? How impressive is it if it comes from that situation? It's not. So you can't just look at the end numbers. You have to go back and look at what? How those numbers were created. Make sense? And we're starting to see this. This is talking, how does today's bull market stack up? The current upturn has to last for nearly 3 more years to match the length of the great bull market of the 1990s. So right now, though, we're what? We're second in line for the longest bull market ever. And what are we starting to see around us? It's getting what? A little long. And we've been saying this for 6 months now. We don't know when the market's going to turn and go down, but it's getting long in the tooth, right? So now's the time to be going back to your investments, to your clients, doing that 21-point checklist light that Jerry has been helping guys with, and going back and showing them a presentation of how to protect some of their assets. So let's talk now, changing the subject, let's talk about retirement income planning made 1, 2, 3 easy. Or is it easy? Well, you can make retirement income planning easy, or you can delve into it a little bit further. I mean, the easy way is like what we have with our sale plan, which is bucket portfolio, right? You have investments that you're going to use in the next 5 years, and those are liquid, so you can be using those. Then you have medium-term investments from 5 to 10, and longer-term investments from 10 to 15, and even longer for 15 plus, or whatever you want to do, the bucket strategy. That's a very easy strategy, and it's worked quite well. But if you want to break it down even further, you can. And the American Institute of Economic Research did that with a report called From Savings to Income, retirement drawdown strategies. You see the link here at the bottom. If you just type that into Google, you'll find that. And what they found is there's 8 drawdown strategies, which fall into 3 basic categories. One is the constant dollar withdrawal strategy. Number 2 is the constant percentage withdrawal strategy. Number 3 is the increasing percentage withdrawal strategy. And then there's a few more strategies, but the variables are so immense they're difficult to evaluate. So there's actually even more than these 8. But these are the ones that could be evaluated because they had at least some level of measurable variables. So the constant dollar strategy means you select an annual drawdown amount and adjust that annually for inflation. So the 4% rule is an example of this type of drawdown strategy. So you start with an initial 4% of the account, and then you're just going to adjust that annually for inflation. Now this can cause problems due to sequence of return risk, as a lot of people found out in the 2000s. But it does give a predictable income flow through retirement. You always know what you're going to be getting the next year. Now the constant percentage, what that is it withdraws a fixed percentage of the portfolio annually. So this means this strategy is less likely to exhaust assets because the actual dollar amount will go down when the market falls. So if we started out with 4% on this, that 4% would remain. So we wouldn't. So if we had $1 million account, we wouldn't start out with $40,000 and adjust it for inflation. What we would do is pull out 4% a year. So if we had a $1 million account, we made $40,000, and then it fell 50%. We're down to $500,000. We'd only pull out $20,000. So does everybody get that? So that's a constant percentage. So it's less likely to exhaust the assets because the actual dollar amount will go down when the market falls down. It can also create an income that varies greatly on a yearly basis. And then the increasing percentage draws an initial percentage of the portfolio and adjusts that percentage upwards throughout retirement. The theory is that for every year you age, that means what? For every year you age, what does that mean? That's one less year you need to fund. Thus, you can increase the percentage withdrawn. Does that make sense? So the 8 strategies: constant dollar, inflation adjusted, constant percentage, smooth percentage, constant percentage ceiling, constant percentage floor, inflation adjusted percentage, increasing percentage, and RMD percentage, and then there's other ones as well, but they're just more difficult there's too many variables. So let's look at these. Constant dollar, inflation adjusted. It starts with a constant dollar and adjusts annually for inflation. So it's not adaptable to market returns. It means, which is a problem. Why? It does give you predictable income, but it's susceptible to sequence of return risk. And again, what's an example of this kind of withdrawal? What's an example of that? See if we've been following up and been talking Greek to everybody. What's an example of this kind of withdrawal? 4% rule. Good job, Bobby. The 4% is an example of this kind of a strategy. The constant percentage withdraws a constant percentage at the beginning of every year. So it allows more adaptability for market changes. If the market goes up, your income is going to go up. If the market goes down, your income is going to go down. But the income can be very variable. So if you think about it, guys, is this a kind of well, we'll talk about that a little bit later, whether this is what you want to do or not. Smooth percentage is similar to constant percentage, except it uses an average of the previous 3 years of drawdown to smooth the consumption. Constant percentage ceiling is similar to constant percentage strategy, except it caps the drawdown in any given year to the original drawdown amount, adjusted for inflation. So similar to constant percentage strategy, except it caps the drawdown in any given year to the original drawdown amount. So you're not going to be able to, if the market goes up 50%, you're not going to draw out an extra 50% of income. There's a ceiling on it. So it's more conservative because it can lower the dollar amount in bad years, but in strong investment returns will not be met with increased drawdown in the good years. Does that make sense? Constant percentage floor is, in this strategy, floor is instituted versus a ceiling. Obviously, it has a higher upside and an increased risk of exhausting savings, because now it's the opposite. They're saying in any particular year, even if the market goes down, you're not going to go below what you pulled out the previous year. So that's going to be a problem because now you've got drawdown risk again. Then you have inflation-adjusted percentage. This strategy starts with a percentage to draw down and adjust that percentage with inflation. So the percentage goes up when the inflation goes up and down when the inflation goes down. The strategy is adaptable to market conditions, but is again susceptible to savings exhaustion because if with high inflation, it could cause the portfolio to go or to be exhausted. Increasing percentage, this strategy starts by drawing out a certain percentage of the portfolio and increasing percentage by 5% each year. The percentage drawdown is capped at 10%. So it's going to go up 5% every year until it reaches 10% and then won't go any higher than that. Operates under the theory that each year gets us closer to depth, which means there's one less year to be funded. And then you have the required minimum distribution, which is what a lot of people do. It's prior to age 70, what you would do is you'd use the inflation-adjusted constant dollar strategy until you reached age 70, and you're starting to require to be make minimum withdrawals. So what is the best choice, do you think? Out of all those 8, what did they find out? Because they crunched the numbers over and over and over. What did they find out? What do you think the best choice was? Average 3 years, percentage of portfolio, constant percentage. Awesome. Everybody's giving me a different answer, which means you're all what? Right. Because they found out there is no best choice. Does that surprise you? There are 3 kinds of lies. Lies, damn lies, and statistics. Because you can make these numbers work for you any way you want. These are they're all contenders because on paper they all look good. So the one that is going to be best depends on what? The one that's going to be best for you depends on what? So I've got the client, I've got me, I've got actual return situation, me. Finally, Michael Smith. The time period you use. It depends on the time period you use. Because depending on what the market does would depend on which one of these would be the best. So I could take a slice of 30 years here, a slice of 30 years here, and a slice of 30 years here, and there would be 3 different ones that were the best. The problem with that is what? So in 1928, 2013, there were 553 historical rolling return periods. So what they used is a utility score to figure out which one was best. The utility score is a score that reflects both average annual spending and the minimum annual spending. Does that make sense? So they're going to look over the 30-year period and see what was the average spending that was allowed, and then what was the floor, what was the least it ever went down to. And they're going to combine both of those. So a higher utility score would mean that you have a higher and stable annual spending that is supported. A lower utility means that the retirement spending is lower and the account exhausts. Does that make sense? Is anybody not clear on that? Can I get a few yays or nays? Yay, so good. So they also looked at Monte Carlo, and guess what they found out about Monte Carlo? Yep, it's crap. And here's why. They looked at historical returns versus Monte Carlo. They used historical because it was more realistic because it accounts for momentum. What do they mean by that? Up years and down years tend to be what? Random or lumped or grouped together. Up years and down years tend to be random or lumped together. Yeah, grouped together. So historical, and then they ended up, if you do use Monte Carlo results in higher utility scores because the random uncorrelated returns fare better than most strategies. So they actually used historical versus Monte Carlo because Monte Carlo gave you better than, and if we're looking at withdrawal rates, are we looking for the best possible withdrawal rates, or are we looking for one that keeps us out of danger? Yeah, it keeps us out of danger. So here are the results. There is no clear winner, as we just talked about. Here's just 3, lumped in the big 3, inflation-adjusted percentage, constant dollar, and constant percentage. Average utility with a 4.5% withdrawal rate versus a 3. So they're looking 4.5 versus 3. If you look, they're all going to be generally lumped together. There's not a huge standout with any of these. And if you do, and here's the thing, you see inflation-adjusted? Average was higher than the others. See how it's higher than the others? But when you go to worst case, guess what? It's lower, well, it's higher in some cases and lower in other cases. So again, it really varies. But they found out the best average utility score was the constant percentage floor, where you pull out the same percentage every single year, but with a floor. So does everybody get that? So let's say I was going to, again, the $1 million portfolio, we talked about that earlier, $1 million portfolio, where I'd pull out, say 4% would be $40,000, and if it went up to $2 million, I'd be pulling out $80,000. If it went down to $500,000, I would have what? $20,000. Yep. But with the floor, yeah, you got a floor, so it would never go below that 40 because it has a floor. You can't go below that. So problem is it got killed in poor outcome and exhausted savings many times. So the average, on average, it was the best one. Well, what's the problem with averages? What's the problem with averages? Can you drown in a pool that has an average depth of 2 inches? Yeah, because you might be in the 10-foot part and the rest is 2 inches. But the average, I'm sorry, or the rest is 1 inch or whatever. So the problem with averages is they don't work. It works on average, but with an average, there's always tails on that are better and worse, and those worse tails on the bell curve are going to kill you, right? So averages don't help you. So the conclusion is this. Retirees face 4 major retirement financial risks. One is uncertainty of lifespans. So with the people that said earlier, it depends, well, it depends on the person. There you go. They were right when they said it depends on the person, because uncertainty of lifespans depends on how long that person is going to live. Unfortunately, how many of us can predict that? So what do we do with somebody's lifespan? What do we generally do? Estimate lower or higher than average? Higher, exactly. Fluctuating market returns, do we have any control over that? No. Inflation potential, we don't have any control over that. Unforeseen personal expenditures, we don't have any control over that. So they face 4 major retirement risks: uncertainty of lifespan, fluctuating market returns, inflation potential, and unforeseen personal expenditures. Can we predict any of those things? No, we can't. So the conclusion is that the first 5 to 10 years of retirement are critical to long-term outcomes. What do they mean by that? It's a sequence of return risks. If the first 10 years go well, guess what? You're golden. If the first 10 years don't go well, you got problems. So the general rule is to spend as little as comfortable at the beginning of retirement. Really? So what do we think about that general rule? Guys, when should we be spending more? We have to have our clients understand this. When should we be spending more? Early on. Why? Yeah, during the healthy time, Jim, because 5 years from now can make the difference between 65 and 70 to somebody can be how big when it comes to health? And geez, when you go from 70 to 75 or 75 to 80, it becomes what? Huge. So this conclusion isn't really helping us, is it? This general rule is not really helping us to spend as little as comfortable in the beginning of retirement. That's not the time you should be spending as little as possible. So the returns are rarely average. I'll give you an example of that. Does anybody know this? I use this on occasion. The Civil War. What happened in the Civil War to 1965? It's 100 years. What's the example I use here? I'm glad I brought it up then, since somebody knows it. Charles got it. Casey's got it. For 100 years, interest rates never went above 5%. So we could look our clients straight in the eye and tell them what? Hey, never worry about what? Go ahead and invest in bonds, because interest rates are never going to what? I mean, 100 years. For 100 years, never went above 5%. So that's a what? That's a fact. That's a law. That's a don't worry about anything above 5%. That's proof. And what do we find out in the 70s? So for 100 years, interest rates never went above 5%. And then what happened in the 70s? Went to above 12, 14, almost, geez, almost tripled, right? So we can't just say things are never going to be the same way. We can't predict the future. Heck, if we had a sunspot, I don't know if you've been seeing it, if you have a sunspot, what's the danger about sunspots? Sunstorms, solar flares. Communications and what else, guys? Do you understand that our power grid is not protected against a sun flare? If we had a major sun flare, it could knock out basically all the transformers in the U.S. and many other countries too. So what would happen with that? How long would it take the U.S. to replace all the power transformers in this whole country? What would happen? Chaos is right. How about China? What do we find out about China? China could be a problem with their markets. It could be a problem inside political. It could be a problem with their real estate bubble that we've talked about many times before. It could be a problem with them getting into an argument about all the, the international waters where they're building these islands to claim more and more. It could be all sorts of problems with China. How about the flash crashes? Are those going to go up or down? Hey, Jeff, could you get on a second?
Yep, I'm here.
Yeah, you were actually talking to me about the flash crashes and what these companies are doing.
Well, yeah, there was a TED Talk about what happens with this black box trading is they're trading on these algorithms, and sometimes these algorithms, they actually have lives of their own as they kind of work their way through the data. And sometimes they interact with each other, and they think that's part of the reason that we have these unexplained flash crashes. The example that they use is there's an out-of-print book on eBay or Amazon that it's called How to Become a Fly or something like that, and it was listed on Amazon or eBay, and the going price was $1.75 million. And then as the day went on, it went all the way up to $23 million, and it's a glitch. That book is worth about 15 bucks. But it's because these algorithms that are embedded in eBay and that work their way around are driving the price up accidentally in this constant loop. And so it takes somebody to recognize, wait a minute, something's wrong, something's going off, we need to stop this and reset this and rethink this.
And actually, what Jeff's talking about there, it summarized here too, with one algorithm executed, 4 tons of gold gone, 1 quant suspected. So, and Jeff, you were also talking about these companies that are doing what with the actual real estate for their servers.
Yeah, they were talking about a company, it's a hedge fund company that does a lot of trading, and they have offices in New York and offices in Chicago. And so they actually dug a straight line trench from Chicago to New York, and it just carries 1 cable just to increase the trading speed 3 milliseconds, which apparently is an eternity in trading times.
It's crazy. And so those kind of things are going to cause more problems or less problems, guys? More, exactly. And are we addressing all the things that could possibly cause problems with the market right here? Or are we barely scratching the surface? Because really, it comes to the probability is, do we have even clue what will cause the next actual crash? Or is it something that none of us are thinking about right now? It's highly likely it's not even on any of our radar now. Because if it was on somebody's radar, guess what? The crash would not occur. Why? If we knew what was, we'd prevent it. So final conclusion is this. Study finds that 3 to 5% initial drawdown rate has been historically ideal. Again, but that's based on what, guys? Finds that 3 to 5% initial drawdown has been historically ideal on averages, exactly, in history, exactly. So outcomes are also maximized when flexible strategies are employed. So how does the 21-point checklist strategy leverage this fact? Outcomes are also maximized when flexible strategies are employed. How does the 21 strategy leverage this? Do we predict anything with our 21-point checklist? 50-50 is right. The 50-50 is what really does it. But do we predict anything? And what do I think about any software that makes any predictions about rates of return, rates of inflation, rates of anything? It's garbage. It's absolute 100% garbage, because can we predict any of those things? No. So as soon as we put that financial software to work, it's what? As soon as we print something, it's what? Right, John? It's bogus. Because as soon as we print it and put it on there, it's obsolete, exactly. And let's say that even if we call the rate of return right, if we call 6% as the average rate of return, how does that help us? Because is it 6% every single year, or is it up and down, up and down, up and out to give an average? If it's up and down to give us an average 6% rate of return, does that help us with sequence of return risk? So we don't predict anything. Also, what do we do every year at an annual review? We pull out the 21-point checklist and what? Go over it again. And what is the 21? Let's think about this, guys. And the analogy, let's see if, before I give you the analogy we use, what does the 21-point checklist do, guys? What does it look at? What does the 21-point checklist look at? Covers the little things. I'd agree with that. What else? Non-financial and financial, yeah. Well, we're getting close here. The last year, that's pretty close, Steve, to what I'm looking for. It's right now. All we're doing is making sure what? That they're in the best possible situation they can be when? Today, currently. That's the only thing we can promise them. And then at the annual review, all we do is what? Make sure they're in the best possible place they can be when? Right then. But we never try to predict the future, because that's a fool's errand. Make sense? And a lot of you already hit on this. We use a 50-50 mentality, meaning we hedge our bets because we have how much control over what's happening in the future? What if we have a great algorithm? Is that going to help us? What if our money manager has a great algorithm? Is that going to help us protect us from down markets? How about stops? Is that going to help us with the down markets? That's what a lot of guys do. Well, I got stops. What happens to stops in flash crashes, guys? They get passed, yeah. And worst case scenario, they might actually not only miss, they might go through with what? An 80% loss instead of a 10% loss, because they actually pop it in there. So we plan for both the good and the bad. We protect against the unforeseen. These are the things that we do at the 21. So by doing this and evaluating every single year, we can help our clients safely pull out the most possible and protect against some unforeseen personal expense. We do all the things that we do the best and make sure they're the best that can be right now. That's the only promise we can make. And we constantly educate ourselves and our clients, because our clients are told that what? They should look for higher rates of return, higher rates of return, higher rates of return. In the end, though, we find out, do clients really want higher rates of return? They do, but they want higher rates of return with what? Safety, right. And if the average retiree, like 80% plus, average retiree, if they have to make a decision between rates of return and safety, what are they going to choose? So we're ahead of it by using a 50-50 mentality. We're way ahead of the game, because what do most other advisors? I mean, guys, you have seen portfolio after portfolio after portfolio of retirees, and how much of their frigging money is in stocks. You know who I wouldn't want to be over the last 2 or 3 months? A Ken Fisher salesperson. Because what's happening to them right now? What they deserve. Because their clients ain't very happy right now. So does it help to know that there's 8% plus with withdrawal strategies? But in the end, what does it come down to? So it doesn't matter. It's what we do. It's these things that we do. It's the fact that we don't promise things. We just make sure our clients are in the best situation possible right now. And every time we meet with them, we make sure they're in the right position. Now, but we are going to use those 8 withdrawal strategies in a couple of different ways in marketing going forward. Not by predicting what's going to happen, but we're going to actually use them to illustrate the differences between us and every other advisor out there. How many other advisors would have any clue about these 8 withdrawal strategies, do you think? Especially in the marketplace we work with. Somebody who has $100,000, they work with people with $100,000 to $2 million to invest. How many advisors do you think would be well-versed on these 8 withdrawal strategies? Yeah, I'd say very few. I'd say virtually none. How many of you were aware about, could have listed all these 8 strategies? So we're going to use this going forward as another way to illustrate our difference from everybody else out there. Make sense? So I know this was a little theoretical, but was it helpful to know these kind of more theoretical types of things every once in a while? Awesome. Good. Well, then you have a wonderful week, and Jeff will actually be talking to you on Friday because we have a training coming up on Thursday, Friday. So Jeff will be talking to you on Friday. So thanks for being on today, and have a great week, and we'll talk to you on Friday. Thanks, everybody.